The morning sun rose over New Eden like it had for the past 27 years. Golden light spread across endless fields of green wheat that moved gently in the warm breeze. Children ran through the streets of Harbor Town, the largest settlement on the planet. Their laughter mixed with the sounds of farmers starting their daily work. Sarah Chen stood on her porch and watched her two young sons chase each other around the apple trees in their yard. The older boy, Tommy, was 8 years old and always tried to catch his little brother Mike, who was only 5. Sarah smiled as she sipped her morning coffee. Life on New Eden was peaceful and good. New Eden was home to 2,300,000 people. Most of them were farmers who grew food that was shipped to other human worlds. The planet had rich soil and perfect weather for growing crops. There were no dangerous animals, no poisonous plants, and no deadly diseases. It was the kind of world that human families dreamed of when they left Earth to find new homes among the stars. The planet had 5 major cities and dozens of smaller towns. Harbor Town was built next to a large lake and served as the main port for shipping crops off-world. Crystal Falls was in the mountains where miners dug up rare metals. Green Valley was surrounded by the biggest farms on the planet. Sunset Bay sat on the coast of the largest ocean. New Hope was the capital city where the colonial government worked. Above the planet, 3 orbital stations floated in space. They were busy places where cargo ships came and went every day. Workers there loaded grain, vegetables, fruits, and meat onto huge transport ships that would carry the food to hungry people on other worlds. The stations also had shops, restaurants, and homes for the 20,000 people who worked in space. Captain Marcus Webb commanded the orbital defense platform called Guardian Station. It had light weapons that were meant to protect against pirates or asteroid strikes. Webb had been a soldier in his younger days, but he came to New Eden because he wanted a quiet life. The defense platform had not fired its weapons in over 15 years. Most days, Webb and his small crew of 30 people just watched cargo ships come and go. On this particular morning, Webb was drinking his second cup of coffee when something appeared on his long-range sensors. It was big, very big. He called his sensor operator, a young woman named Lisa Park. "Lisa, can you tell me what that is?" Webb pointed at the strange readings on his screen. Lisa worked at her control panel for several minutes. Her face grew pale as she read the data. "Captain, there are ships coming toward us, lots of ships." "How many ships?" Webb asked. "I count 47 vessels, sir. They are moving fast and they will be here in 6 hours. Webb felt his stomach drop. 47 ships was not a trading fleet. It was not a group of colonists looking for a new home. It was a war fleet, but who would attack New Eden? The planet had no enemies. It had no military value. It was just a farming world full of peaceful people. "Are they human ships?" Webb asked, though he already knew the answer. Lisa shook her head. "No, sir. The computer does not recognize their design. These are alien ships." Webb immediately sent a message to the colonial government in New Hope. Governor Janet Morrison received the warning with shock and fear. New Eden had no real military. The planet had a small police force and some emergency workers, but no army and no warships. The only weapons on the entire planet were hunting rifles and the light guns on Guardian Station. Governor Morrison called an emergency meeting with her advisors. They tried to contact the approaching fleet, but the aliens did not answer their messages. They sent offers of trade, requests for peaceful talks, and even offers of food and supplies. The alien ships remained silent and kept coming closer. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the planet's top scientist, worked frantically to learn about the alien ships. She discovered they belonged to a species called the Zephrians. The computer files showed that Zephrians were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large black eyes. They ruled a group of worlds called the Zephrian hegemony. The files said they were known to be aggressive and territorial. "Governor," Dr. Hayes said with a trembling voice, "the Zephrians consider this part of space to be their territory. They believe humans have no right to be here." Governor Morrison felt cold fear spread through her body. "Can we evacuate the planet?" "Not in 6 hours," her advisor replied. "We would need weeks to move 2 million people." Our transport ships are all away delivering crops to other worlds. The governor made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered all orbital stations to prepare for emergency evacuation. She told the planet's communication system to broadcast a general warning to all citizens. People should go to their homes and wait for further instructions. She hoped the aliens just wanted to scare them and would leave when they saw that new Eden was no threat to anyone. As the alien fleet grew closer, Captain Webb and his crew on Guardian Station watched their approach with growing dread. The Zephrian ships were dark and angular, like giant metal spears pointed at their peaceful world. The largest ship was over 2 kilometers long and bristled with weapon ports. 3 hours before the aliens arrived, the first evacuation ships began leaving the orbital stations. Families with small children got priority boarding. Sarah Chun and her 2 boys were among the lucky ones who made it to an evacuation ship. As their transport pulled away from the station, little Mike pressed his face against the window and asked his mother why they had to leave their home. "We will come back soon," Sarah told her son. Though she feared it might not be true, many people did not make it off the orbital stations in time. When the Zephrian fleet arrived, there were still 15,000 people trying to evacuate. Captain Webb made the brave choice to stay at his post and help coordinate the evacuation. He sent his own crew away on the last transport but remained alone on Guardian Station. The Zephrian fleet commander was named Korath. He was a veteran of many wars and believed that humans were a dangerous species that would eventually threaten Zephrian space. When his superiors ordered him to make an example of New Eden, he felt no mercy. To him, humans were pests that needed to be eliminated before they became a real problem. Korath opened communication with the human orbital stations. His voice was cold and harsh when he spoke. "Humans of this world," he said, "you have built your colony in space that belongs to the Zephrian hegemony. You will leave immediately or be destroyed." Captain Webb responded from Guardian Station. "We are evacuating our people as fast as we can. Please give us more time." "You have had 27 years, Korath replied. "Time is over." The Zephrian attack began without further warning. Bright beams of energy lanced out from their warships and struck the orbital stations. Guardian Station's shields held for 30 seconds before collapsing. The station exploded in a brilliant flash of light, killing Captain Webb instantly. The other 2 orbital stations tried to flee, but the Zephrian ships were faster. Within minutes, both stations were destroyed along with the 15,000 people still aboard them. The evacuation ships that had escaped earlier watched in horror from a safe distance as their homes burned in space. But the aliens were not finished. Korath turned his fleet toward the planet below and began bombing the surface. The cities of New Eden had no defenses against orbital bombardment. Harbor Town was the first to die, consumed by nuclear fire that turned the lake into boiling steam. Crystal Falls in the mountains lasted only minutes. Longer before antimatter bombs turned the peaks into glowing craters, the people on the surface tried to run, but there was nowhere to hide from weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. Green Valley's vast farms became fields of radioactive ash. Sunset Bay and its beautiful beaches were vaporized along with everyone who lived there. New Hope, the capital city, was struck by dozens of bombs that left nothing but a smoking hole in the ground. The bombardment continued for 6 hours. The Zephrians were thorough in their destruction. They targeted not just cities and towns, but also individual farms, roads, bridges, and any sign of human presence. They wanted to make sure that nothing remained of the human colony. When it was over, New Eden was silent. The green fields were gone. The laughing children were gone. The farmers and miners and shopkeepers were all gone. 2,300,000 people had died in a single day. The planet that had been humanity's garden world was now a burned wasteland covered in radioactive dust. The evacuation. Ships that had escaped carried only 8,000 survivors. They watched from space as their world died, knowing that their families and friends were gone forever. Among them was Sarah Cheen, holding her 2 boys as they cried for their lost home. Commander Korath was satisfied with his work. He sent a message to Zephrian High Command reporting that the human colony had been completely eliminated. He believed he had sent a clear message to humanity about Zephrian power. He thought other human worlds would be afraid and would stay away from Zephrian space. The alien fleet departed New Eden and returned to their own territory. Behind them they left only death and silence. The planet that had once been full of life and hope was now a tomb floating in the darkness of space. The evacuation ships scattered to different human worlds, carrying news of the massacre. The survivors told their terrible story to anyone who would listen. They spoke of their peaceful world and their murdered families. They spoke of the aliens who had killed without mercy or reason. Sarah Chun and her boys eventually reached Earth, the mother world of humanity. She told government officials about New Eden and the Zephrians. She showed them pictures of her farm and her husband who had died in the bombing. She begged them to make sure that no other human colony would suffer the same fate. The officials listened politely and promised to investigate. They told Sarah that they would file protests with other alien governments and seek justice through diplomatic channels. But Sarah could see in their eyes that they thought New Eden was too far away and too small to matter much. Earth had billions of people and hundreds of colony worlds. The loss of one farming planet seemed like a minor tragedy to them. For 3 weeks, the massacre of New Eden was just another news story that most people quickly forgot. The galaxy was a big place with many problems. Human officials sent messages to the Zephrians demanding explanations, but received only silence. In return, some human worlds increased their defenses, but most people believed the aliens would be satisfied with destroying one colony. They were wrong. The silence that followed the destruction of New Eden was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. Deep in the heart of human space, ancient machines were beginning to wake up. Old shipyards that had been quiet for decades started receiving new orders. Military officers who had been enjoying peaceful retirements found themselves called back to duty. The Zephrians had made one terrible mistake. They thought humans were like other species in the galaxy, weak, divided, and quick to forget their losses. They believed that destroying one world would make humans afraid and keep them away from Zephrian territory. But humans were different. When pushed too far, they did not retreat. They did not forget, and they did not forgive. The silence of New Eden would soon be answered with a roar that would shake the galaxy. The survey ship Discovery had been exploring empty space for 6 months when Captain David Park received new orders. His mission was to check on distant human colonies and map new trade routes. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Park and his crew of 25 people spent their days scanning planets and asteroids for valuable minerals. Park was Lisa Park's father. Lisa had died on Guardian Station 3 weeks ago, but David did not know this yet. The Discovery was too far from human space to receive regular news updates. The last message they had received was 2 months old and talked about a good harvest season on the farming worlds. On Tuesday morning, Park was reading reports when his navigation officer called out, "Captain, we are approaching the New Eden system." Park nodded and marked their position on his chart. New Eden was supposed to be their next stop for refueling and resupply. The colony had always been friendly to survey ships, and Park looked forward to getting fresh food and news from home, but when the Discovery dropped out of faster-than-light travel, something was wrong. Park's sensors should have detected the busy orbital stations around New Eden immediately. Instead, they found only silence and floating debris. "Where are the stations?" Park asked his sensor operator. The young man worked frantically at his controls. "Sir, I am detecting wreckage. Lots of wreckage. It looks like the orbital stations have been destroyed." Park felt his heart stop. He ordered his ship to move closer to the planet. What they found made his crew sick with horror. The beautiful, green world that had fed millions of people across human space was now a burned wasteland. Cities were gone. Farms were gone. Everything was gone. Park immediately sent an emergency message to Earth using his ship's most powerful transmitter. He sent pictures and sensor readings that showed the complete destruction of New Eden. He reported that, too, Million people were missing and presumed dead. He requested immediate assistance from the military. The message took 6 days to reach Earth through the network of communication relays. When it arrived at the colonial office in Geneva, Secretary Helen Rodriguez nearly dropped her coffee cup. She read the report 3 times before believing it was real. Rodriguez immediately called an emergency meeting with the Human Federation Council. Representatives from all major human worlds gathered in the great assembly hall on Earth. They watched in stunned silence as Park's images played on the massive screens above them. The pictures showed New Eden's capital city as a smoking crater, 20 kilometers wide. The farming valleys that had once fed millions were now fields of radioactive glass. The beautiful lakes and forests that had attracted colonists from across human space were gone forever. President Marcus Thompson of the United Human Federation stood at the podium with tears in his eyes. He had visited New Eden many times and knew Governor Morrison personally. Now she was dead along with everyone else on the planet. "Citizens of humanity," Thompson said in a voice heavy with grief and anger, "we have suffered the greatest tragedy in our history. The colony of New Eden has been completely destroyed by an alien attack. 2,300,000 innocent people have been murdered." The assembly hall erupted in shocked voices and angry shouts. Representatives demanded to know who had done this terrible thing and why. Thompson raised his hand for silence and continued his speech. "We have identified the attackers as the Zephrian hegemony. They claim that New Eden was built in their territory without permission. They offered no warnings and accepted no negotiations. They simply came and killed everyone." Thompson paused and looked directly into the cameras that were broadcasting his words to billions of people across human space. "The Zephrians believe they have taught us a lesson about staying in our place. They believe we will be afraid and will abandon our colonies near their borders. They are wrong." The president pressed a button on his podium and new images appeared on the screens. These showed vast underground facilities that most humans did not know existed. Massive shipyards carved into asteroids. Weapon factories hidden beneath the surfaces of dead moons. Military bases that had been secret for decades. "For 50 years, humanity has prepared for this day," Thompson continued. "We hoped it would never come. We built our colonies and traded with peaceful aliens and lived quiet lives. But we also remembered the lessons of our history. We remembered that bullies and killers exist everywhere in the universe. We prepared for war while hoping for peace." Thompson's voice grew stronger and more determined. "Today I am authorizing the activation of the Total War Protocol. Every hidden shipyard will begin building warships. Every secret factory will start making weapons. Every human world will contribute to our response. The Zephrians wanted to see what happens when you murder innocent humans. They are about to find out." Across human space, the president's speech was broadcast to every colony, every space station, and every ship. Billions of people watched and listened as their leader declared that humanity would not accept the massacre of New Eden. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. On Mars, the giant underground shipyards that had been building civilian cargo ships for decades suddenly switched to military production. Workers who had never seen a warship began assembling massive dreadnoughts from secret plans that had been waiting for this day. The red planet's surface split open to reveal launch rails that could fire completed battleships directly into space. On Europa, the ice-covered moon of Jupiter, military engineers began activating weapons factories that had been hidden beneath the frozen surface. These facilities had been built during humanity's expansion into the solar system but had never been used. Now they came alive with the sounds of machines building torpedo launchers, energy cannons, and armor plating for the coming war fleet. The asteroid belt around Earth's sun contained dozens of secret shipyards disguised as mining operations. These facilities were so large they had been carved into asteroids the size of small moons. Each one could build 100 warships at the same time. For 50 years they had remained dark and silent. Now they blazed with light as millions of workers began the greatest Construction project in human history. Admiral Elena Vasquez received her new orders while she was visiting her daughter on the farming world of Ceres Prime. Vasquez had been the top military commander in human space until she retired 5 years ago to spend time with her family. She was a small woman with gray hair and quiet manners, but she had never lost a battle in 30 years of service. The message from President Thompson was simple: Elena, we need you. Come home immediately. Vasquez kissed her daughter goodbye and took the next transport ship to Earth. When she arrived at Federation headquarters, she found the building buzzing with activity. Officers who had been enjoying peaceful retirements were returning to duty. Civilians with engineering and manufacturing skills were volunteering for military service. The entire human government was transforming itself for war. President Thompson met with Vasquez in his private office. Elena, I need you to command our response to the New Eden massacre. We are going to build the largest fleet in galactic history, and I want you to lead it. Vasquez looked at the classified reports about New Eden's destruction. She studied the intelligence files about the Zephrian hegemony and their military capabilities. The aliens had about 12,000 warships spread across 50 star systems. It was a formidable force that had conquered dozens of weaker species over the past 1,000 years. How many ships will I have? Vasquez asked. Thompson smiled grimly. How many do you want? I want enough ships to make sure this never happens again, Vasquez replied. I want the Zephrians to surrender the moment they see us coming. I want every other alien species in the galaxy too. Understand that attacking human civilians is a death sentence? Then you shall have them, Thompson said. We are activating every shipyard, every factory, and every construction facility in human space. We will build as many ships as it takes. Within days, the news of humanity's mobilization began spreading. Across the galaxy, alien intelligence services reported massive activity in human space, but their analysts found the reports hard to believe. The peaceful humans who had spent decades trading and farming were suddenly building what appeared to be the largest military fleet ever assembled. The Zephrian High Command received these intelligence reports with amusement. General Korath, who had destroyed New Eden, told his superiors that the reports were obviously exaggerated. Humans were weak creatures who would make a few threats and then forget about their lost colony. The idea that they could build hundreds of thousands of warships was ridiculous. Let them waste their resources on a few extra patrol boats, Korath said dismissively. When they realize the cost of building a real fleet, they will give up and go back to their farming. But the reports kept coming. Alien spies near human space sent back increasingly alarming information. The humans were not building a few extra patrol boats. They were constructing massive battle fleets that seemed to appear from nowhere. Ships the size of cities were taking shape in orbital yards that had been invisible just weeks before. Dr. Sarah Chun, the survivor from New Eden, found herself working 18-hour days at the Federation's new military headquarters. Her experience as a farmer might not seem useful for building warships, but she understood logistics and supply chains better than most military officers. The Federation needed people who could organize the movement of materials and workers across hundreds of star systems. Sarah's 2 boys stayed with her parents on Earth while she threw herself into the war effort. Every day she worked on planning how to feed and supply the millions of people who were building humanity's response fleet. She thought about her husband and neighbors who had died on New Eden, and her grief gave her the strength to work through exhaustion and stress. We need more steel for the shipyards on Titan, reported Colonel Williams, one of Sarah's assistants. Redirect the mining ships from the Proxima system, Sarah replied without looking up from her charts. And increase food shipments to the construction crews. They are working triple shifts and need more calories. The scale of humanity's mobilization was staggering. Every human world contributed something to the war effort. Agricultural planets increased food production to feed the millions of workers building ships. Mining worlds stripped entire asteroids down to their cores to provide metal for ship hulls. Manufacturing worlds converted their civilian factories to produce weapons and military equipment. Advanced human colonies that had developed new technologies shared their innovations with the military. Faster engines, stronger armor, more powerful weapons, and better sensors all flowed into the designs for the new warships. Ships that would have been impossible to build just months before began taking shape in the hidden shipyards on the world of New Geneva. The Federation's top scientists worked to decode captured Zephrian technology. They studied wreckage from the attack on New Eden and learned about alien weapons and defenses. This information was immediately sent to the shipyards so that human vessels could be designed to defeat Zephrian equipment. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, who had escaped New Eden's destruction, led a team of researchers studying Zephrian psychology and military tactics. She wanted to understand how the aliens thought and fought so that Admiral Vasquez could plan the most effective attack. The Zephrians believe in overwhelming force, Dr. Hayes reported to a meeting of military planners. They attack weak targets with large fleets to achieve quick victories. They have never faced an enemy that could match their numbers. Admiral Vasquez nodded as she reviewed the research reports. Then we will give them something they have never seen before. We will show them what happens when humanity decides to go to war. The construction continued day and night across human space. Massive dreadnoughts that could destroy entire fleets took shape in the hidden shipyards. Carriers that could launch thousands of fighter craft rolled off assembly lines. Support ships that could keep a fleet supplied for years were built in enormous numbers, but it was not just about building ships. Humanity also began training the millions of people who would crew the new vessels. Veterans came out of retirement to train new recruits. Civilians with useful skills were given crash courses in military operations. The entire human species was transforming itself into a war machine. 6 weeks after the destruction of New Eden, Admiral Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the new Federation headquarters and watched as the first completed battle group left Earth's orbital shipyards. 12 massive battleships accompanied by dozens of support vessels headed out toward the rally point where the main fleet was assembling. It was just the beginning. Reports from across human space told of similar scenes on hundreds of worlds. Ships were being completed faster than anyone had thought possible. The hidden shipyards were revealing their true capacity, and it was far greater than even human leaders had imagined. President Thompson joined Vasquez on the observation deck as another battle group departed. "How long until we are ready?" he asked. Vasquez checked her tablet computer, which showed real-time reports from shipyards across human space. New vessels were being completed every hour. 3 more months, she said. 3 months and we will have the largest fleet in galactic history. And then? Thompson asked. Admiral Vasquez looked out at the stars where her fleet was gathering. Then we remind the galaxy why you should never attack innocent humans. We remind them that beneath our peaceful exterior lies something that can darken the very stars themselves. The president nodded grimly. The Zephrians had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about staying in their place. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping quietly among the stars for 50 years. They had awakened humanity's capacity for total war, and humanity was very, very good at war when they put their minds to it. The shipyards of Titan had been quiet for 40 years. Most people thought they were just mining stations that dug ice from the moon's surface. They were wrong. Deep beneath the frozen ground, massive construction bays stretched for hundreds of kilometers. These facilities had been built in secret after humanity's first contact with hostile aliens decades ago. Chief Engineer Maria Santos stood in the main control room and watched as the first super dreadnought slowly rose from its construction bay. The ship was 3 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could crack a planet's surface. Its hull was made from materials so advanced that most human scientists did not know they existed. Bay 7 reports the Vengeance is ready for launch, reported her assistant. Santos nodded and pressed the button that would open the massive doors above them. For the first time in 40 years, Titan's hidden shipyards revealed themselves to the universe. What had appeared to be a simple mining moon suddenly split open like a flower. exposing the greatest military construction facility ever built. The Vengeance rose majestically into space, followed by 11 more super dreadnoughts. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy an entire fleet. More importantly, each ship carried a message written in nuclear fire. Humanity would not forget New Eden. Similar scenes played out across the solar system. On Mars, the red planet's surface opened to reveal launch rails that fired completed battleships directly into space. The asteroid belt around Earth buzzed with activity as hidden shipyards revealed themselves one by one. Even Earth's moon split open to show massive weapons factories that had been disguised as research stations. Admiral Elena Vasquez watched the launch from her flagship, the new command ship Unity. The Unity was the largest vessel ever built by humans, serving as both a warship and a mobile headquarters. Its bridge could coordinate the movements of 1 million ships simultaneously. "Admiral," reported Commander Jackson, her chief of staff, "we have confirmation from all sectors. The mobilization is proceeding faster than projected." Vasquez studied the holographic display that showed human space. Every star system was marked with symbols showing ship construction, troop training, and resource production. The scale was breathtaking. Every human world was contributing to what historians would later call the Great Mobilization. On the agricultural world of New Harvest, farmers worked day and night to feed the millions of people building the war fleet. The planet's population had volunteered to work 18-hour days to make sure no shipyard worker went hungry. Children too young to work in the fields helped by gathering vegetables and caring for livestock. Governor Patricia Wells stood in her command center and coordinated food shipments to over 200 construction sites. "We need another 1 million tons of grain for the Proxima shipyards," she told her logistics chief. "Already loaded and ready to ship," came the reply. "The transport convoy will launch in 2 hours." Wells nodded with satisfaction. New Harvest had been settled by refugees from various Earth disasters 50 years ago. They understood what it meant to lose everything. When they heard about New Eden, every farmer on the planet had volunteered to work without rest until humanity's response was ready. The mining world of deep rock had been stripped almost bare to provide metal for ship construction. Massive automated miners worked continuously, digging deeper into the planet's core than ever before. The world's administrator, Director Kim Park, pushed his equipment beyond all safety limits to meet the demand for raw materials. "Sir, the deep miners are overheating," reported his chief engineer. "We need to shut down for maintenance." "No," Park replied firmly. "Every hour we delay means more time for the aliens to prepare. Push the machines harder. If they break, we will build new ones." Park's miners were working so hard that the planet's surface was beginning to collapse in some areas. But they continued digging because they knew that every ton of metal they produced would become part of a ship that would avenge New Eden on the industrial world of New Detroit. Factories that had been making civilian goods for decades suddenly switched to military production. Assembly lines that had built farming equipment now constructed missile launchers. Plants that had manufactured air recyclers for space stations began making life support systems for warships. Factory supervisor Janet Wilson had worked at the same plant for 20 years, making peaceful products for human colonies. Now she supervised the construction of weapons that could level cities. The work was harder and more dangerous, but she and her workers pushed themselves because they knew their labor was helping to build humanity's response. "How many torpedo launchers did we complete today?" Wilson asked her assistant. 237, came the reply. "That is 50 more than yesterday." "Good," Wilson said. "Tomorrow we will make 300. The transformation was not limited to the major industrial worlds. Even small colonies contributed what they could. The research station on Europa provided new shield technology that made human ships nearly invulnerable. The agricultural moon of Ceres sent food and medical supplies. The trading post at Proxima Centauri served as a coordination center for ship movements. Captain Sarah Chun found herself assigned to one of the most important jobs in the mobilization. As a logistics coordinator, she was responsible for making sure that materials and workers got to where they were needed most. Her office on Earth was filled with screens showing the status of construction projects across hundreds of star systems. "The Vega shipyards need more welders," reported her assistant, Lieutenant Morrison. "Transfer 1,000 workers from the completed project at Volf 359, Sean replied without hesitation, "and send them extra food rations. They will be working double shifts." Chin had lost her husband and home on New Eden, but she channeled her grief into organizing humanity's response. Every ship that rolled off the production lines was another step toward justice for her murdered family and friends. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes led a team of scientists who were designing new weapons specifically for fighting Zephrians. They studied every piece of alien technology they could find and developed countermeasures for Zephrian defenses. Their work was classified at the highest levels, but rumors spread through the scientific community about weapons that could destroy entire star systems. "The new antimatter torpedoes are ready for testing," Hayes reported to Admiral Vasquez during their weekly briefing. "How powerful are they?" Vasquez asked. "Each torpedo carries enough antimatter to destroy a moon," Hayes replied. "We have built 10,000 of them." Vasquez nodded grimly. The weapons being created for the war fleet were beyond anything that had existed before. Humanity was not just building more ships than their enemies. They were building better ships with weapons that would shock the galaxy. The Zephrian hegemony received intelligence reports about human activity, but their leaders found the information hard to believe. General Korath, who had destroyed New Eden, dismissed most of the reports as exaggerations. "The humans are building some extra patrol ships," he told the Zephrian High Command. "This is normal after an attack. They want to feel safer, so they will waste resources on a few dozen vessels that will make no difference." But the reports kept coming, and they painted a picture that disturbed even Korath. Human space was buzzing with activity on a scale that seemed impossible. Hundreds of star systems were involved in what appeared to be the largest military buildup in galactic history. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Vex, "our spies near human space are sending increasingly alarming reports. They claim the humans are building thousands of warships." Korath laughed dismissively. "Thousands? That is ridiculous. The humans are farmers and traders. They do not have the industrial capacity to build a real fleet. Our intelligence officers are being fooled by human propaganda." But deep in Zephrian space, a few military analysts were beginning to worry. Commander Zex studied the reports from human space and noticed patterns that disturbed him. The humans were not just building ships randomly. They were following a coordinated plan that involved their entire civilization. "General," Zex reported to his superior, "I believe we may have underestimated human capabilities. These reports suggest they have been preparing for large-scale warfare for decades." The general dismissed Zex's concerns. "The humans are weak. We proved that when we destroyed their colony without losing a single ship. They will build a few vessels, make some angry speeches, and then forget about their losses. It is the way of inferior species." While the Zephrians argued among themselves, humanity's mobilization continued to gain momentum. The recruitment centers on every human world were overwhelmed with volunteers. People of all ages and backgrounds wanted to serve in the fleet that would avenge New Eden. Commander David Park, whose daughter Lisa had died defending New Eden, volunteered to serve despite being past normal retirement age. His experience as a survey ship captain made him valuable for training new crews. Park worked 20-hour days teaching young officers how to navigate in hostile space. "Remember," Park told a class of new navigators, "when we reach Zephrian space, we will be outnumbered and far from home. Every mistake could cost lives. Every calculation must be perfect." The students listened carefully to their instructor, knowing that he had personal reasons for wanting them to succeed. Park's daughter had died trying to protect innocent people. Now he was training the officers who would make sure such a tragedy never happened again. The training programs were as intensive as the ship construction. Millions of new recruits learned how to operate the advanced weapons and systems being installed on the warfleet. Veterans came out of retirement to share their knowledge with young sailors who would crew the new vessels. Vice Admiral Rebecca Stone had commanded humanity's largest peacekeeping fleet before retiring to write her memoirs. Now she found herself training officers to command battle groups of 100 ships or more. The scale of the new fleet required new tactics and strategies that had never been tested in actual combat. The old rules of space warfare do not apply when you have this many ships, Stone explained to her students. We are not just building a bigger fleet. We are creating a new type of military force that can remake the balance of power in the galaxy. 3 months after the destruction of New Eden, the first major battle groups began assembling at rally points throughout human space. Admiral Vasquez traveled between these gathering points, inspecting the ships and crews that would soon carry humanity's message to the Zephrians. At the Alpha Centauri rally point, Vasquez reviewed a battle group consisting of 50 super dreadnoughts, 200 battleships, 500 cruisers, and over 1,000 smaller vessels. The ships stretched across space for hundreds of kilometers, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and bristling with weapons. Status report, Vasquez requested from the battle group commander. All ships ready for combat operations, Admiral Foster replied. Crews are trained and eager to depart. Excellent, Vasquez said. How many more battle groups like this do we have? Foster checked his tablet computer. As of this morning, we have completed 800 similar formations. More are joining the fleet every day. Vasquez felt a grim satisfaction. 800 battle groups meant over 600,000 warships ready for combat, and they were still building more. The Zephrians had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about military power. They were about to receive an education that would terrify them for generations. At the Proxima rally point, the newest and most advanced ships in the fleet were gathering. These vessels incorporated technology that had been developed in secret research facilities for decades. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their shields could survive the explosion of a star. Their engines could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of months. Captain Maria Santos, now promoted to command one of the new supercarriers, stood on her bridge and watched as fighter squadrons practiced attack runs. Each of her fighters carried more firepower than most alien battleships. She could launch 10,000 of them simultaneously. Captain, reported her flight operations officer, all squadrons report ready for combat. Very good, Santos replied. How long until the rest of the fleet arrives? The main force should be here within 2 weeks, came the answer. Then we can begin the final approach to Zephrian space. Santos nodded and looked out at the growing fleet around her ship. In just a few months, humanity had built the largest military force in galactic history. The peaceful farmers and traders had revealed themselves to be the most capable warriors the universe had ever seen. The Zephrians had destroyed 1 human colony and killed 2 million innocent people. In response, humanity was preparing to field nearly 1 million warships crewed by the finest soldiers and sailors they had ever trained. The aliens had awakened something that had been sleeping quietly among the stars. Soon, they would learn what happened when you murdered human children in their beds. The Zephrian home system of Corax had been the center of their empire for over 1,000 years. 3 planets orbited the bright yellow star, with the homeworld of Zephyr Prime holding 8 billion souls. It was a beautiful system with crystal cities, floating gardens, and orbital palaces that showed the wealth and power of the hegemony. General Korath stood in his office in the capital city and looked out at the peaceful scene below. Citizens went about their daily lives, completely unaware that anything unusual was happening. The destruction of New Eden 3 months ago was ancient history to most Zephrians. It had been just another minor military action against an inferior species. Sir, reported his aide, Commander Vex, we are receiving urgent messages from our border stations. Something large is approaching from human space. Korath did not look up from his paperwork. How large? 12 ships? 20? Vex checked his communication device again, his face growing pale. Sir, the reports are difficult to believe. The border stations claim they are detecting thousands of human ships. Thousands? Korath laughed. Our intelligence was right. The humans are trying to scare us with false sensor readings. Tell the border stations to check their equipment. 30 minutes later, more reports arrived, then more. Station after station along the border with human space reported massive fleets approaching. The numbers grew larger with each message. 1,000 ships, 5,000 ships, 10,000 ships. This is impossible, Korath muttered as he read the latest reports. The humans do not have 10,000 warships. They barely had a dozen patrol vessels before we destroyed their colony. Admiral Vex, commander of the Zephrian home fleet, burst into Korath's office without waiting for permission. His normally calm demeanor was gone, replaced by barely controlled panic. General, we need to mobilize the entire fleet immediately, Vex said urgently. The reports from our border are not false. Something enormous is coming this way. Korath stood up and activated the large display screen on his wall. It showed a map of Zephrian space with all their military forces marked. The hegemony had 12,000 ships spread across 50 star systems. It was a massive fleet that had conquered dozens of species over the centuries. Show me these human ships, Korath demanded. Vex uploaded the latest sensor data to the display. What appeared made both officers step backward in shock. A wall of contacts was moving through space toward the Zephrian home system. The computer counted them automatically. 50,000 ships, 100,000 ships, 200,000 ships. The sensors must be malfunctioning, Korath whispered, but they were not malfunctioning. At the edge of the Korak system, the first elements of humanity's response fleet began to arrive. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, Unity, and watched as her vast armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Fleet status report, she ordered. Commander Jackson consulted his screens. First wave deployment complete. 150,000 ships now in system. Second wave will arrive in 6 hours. Third wave in 12 hours, Vasquez nodded with satisfaction. The journey from human space had taken 2 weeks, with the fleet arriving in carefully timed waves to avoid crowding. Even so, the space around? The Zephrian home system was becoming very busy. Begin standard deployment, Vasquez ordered. I want every approach to their worlds covered. Nothing gets in or out without our permission. Across the Korak system, human ships took up positions with military precision. Super dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the Zephrians had ever built moved into place around each planet. Carrier groups launched millions of fighters that spread out like clouds of angry insects. Battle groups formed defensive screens that could stop any attempt to break out on Zephyr Prime. The Planetary Defense Center erupted in chaos as their sensors tried to count the approaching human fleet. The numbers kept growing as more ships arrived. 300,000 vessels, 500,000 vessels, 700,000 vessels. This cannot be real, Defense Minister Kleck said to his staff. No species in galactic history has ever fielded such a fleet. But the evidence was undeniable. Human warships filled the space around their system like a metallic cloud. The largest ships were the size of small cities, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The smaller vessels were still larger than most Zephrian battleships. General Korath received an emergency call from the Zephrian High Command on the capital world. Supreme Leader Vorth appeared on his screen, his usual arrogance replaced by fear and confusion. Korath, Vorth said urgently, explain to me how the humans have nearly 1 million warships. Your intelligence report said they were a weak species, with no significant military. I do not understand it either, Supreme Leader, Korath stammered. Our spies reported normal activity in human space. There was no indication they possessed such capabilities. Well, they clearly do possess them, Vorth snapped. That fleet could destroy our entire civilization. What do they want? Before Korath could answer, every communication system on Zephyr Prime received the same message simultaneously. Admiral Vasquez's face appeared on screens across the planet, her expression cold and determined. Citizens of the Zephrian hegemony, she began in perfect Zephrian language. I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Human Federation. 3 months ago, your military forces attacked and destroyed the peaceful colony of New Eden. 2,300,000 innocent humans were murdered without warning or mercy. The Admiral paused, letting her words sink in. Across Zephyr Prime, 8 billion aliens watched and listened as the human commander continued her broadcast. Your leaders believed they were teaching humanity a lesson about staying in our place. They believed we would be frightened by your show of force. They were wrong. Today, you will learn what happens when you murder human children in their beds. The display shifted to show the vast human fleet surrounding their system. Ship after ship filled the screen in an endless parade of military might. The Zephrians watching could see that this was not a threat or a bluff. This was a demonstration of power beyond their wildest nightmares. 900,000 human warships now surround your home system, Vasquez continued. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy your largest cities. Together, they represent the combined industrial might of over 500 human worlds. You wanted to see what humanity is capable of when pushed too far. Look around you and learn. In the Zephrian Command Center, General Korath stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His sensors showed human ships in every direction. They were not just surrounding the planets, they were literally blocking out the light from nearby stars. The sky above Zephyr Prime was growing dark as hundreds of thousands of human vessels moved into position. Sir, reported his communications. Officer, we are receiving surrender demands from the human fleet. They want our complete and unconditional surrender within 6 hours. Surrender? Korath said weakly. We have 12,000 ships. Surely we can fight them. Admiral Vex shook his head grimly. General, we have 12,000 ships spread across 50 star systems. They have 900,000 ships right here, right now. If we called back every vessel we have, we would still be outnumbered 75-1. The scale was simply incomprehensible. The Zephrian military had spent centuries building their fleet of 12,000 vessels. It had seemed like an unstoppable force that could conquer any enemy. Now they faced a human armada that was 75 times larger and equipped with technology they had never seen before. What are their terms? Korath asked quietly. The communications officer read from his screen. Complete surrender of all Zephrian military forces. Immediate withdrawal from all conquered territories. War crimes trials for those responsible for the New Eden massacre. Reparations to be paid to human survivors. And permanent human observers to ensure compliance. Korath felt his world crumbling around him. 3 months ago, he had been a conquering hero who had destroyed a human colony without losing a single ship. Now he faced the prospect of surrender to the very species he had thought was weak and defenseless. On Zephyr Prime's surface, citizens looked up at the sky and saw something that terrified them. The familiar stars were disappearing one by one as human ships moved into position. The sky was literally darkening as the massive fleet blocked out the light from space. Children asked their parents why the stars were going away. Adults had no answers that would not frighten them even more. The sight of nearly 1 million alien warships surrounding their homeworld was beyond anything in their worst nightmares. Supreme Leader Vorth called an emergency session of the Zephrian High Command. The most powerful leaders in their civilization gathered in the Great Council chamber and stared at the tactical displays showing the human fleet. Options, Vorth demanded of his military advisors. We could attempt to fight, suggested one general hesitantly. Our ships are of good quality, even if we are outnumbered. 75-1 is not just outnumbered, Admiral Vex replied. It is annihilation. We would be destroyed completely, and our worlds would be left defenseless. What about asking other species for help? Suggested another advisor. Who would help us against a fleet that large? Vorth asked bitterly. Every alien government in the galaxy is probably reconsidering their relationship with humanity right now. Indeed, across the galaxy, alien civilizations were receiving reports about the human fleet at Zephyr Prime. The news spread quickly through diplomatic channels. trade networks, and intelligence services. Species that had considered humans to be minor players in galactic politics suddenly realized they had been catastrophically wrong. The Altarian Republic, which had been planning to demand tribute from human colonies, immediately canceled their military preparations and sent messages of friendship to Earth, the vegan empire, which had been ignoring human requests for trade. Agreements suddenly became very interested in negotiations. Even the ancient Andromedans, who had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers, sent observers to watch the events at Zephyr Prime. They had not seen such a massive military deployment since the great wars of their distant past. Back in the Korak system, Admiral Vasquez received reports from her fleet commanders. The deployment was proceeding perfectly. Every human ship was in position, and their sensors were monitoring every Zephrian vessel in the system. "Admiral," reported Captain Santos from her carrier, "we have detected movement from the Zephrian home fleet. They appear to be taking defensive positions around their primary orbital stations." "Let them," Vasquez replied. "We are not here to conquer their worlds. We are here to demonstrate that attacking human civilians carries a price they cannot afford to pay." The Admiral opened a communication channel to the Zephrian leadership. General Korath's face appeared on her screen, looking defeated and exhausted. "General," Vasquez said calmly, "you have 4 hours remaining to surrender. I suggest you use that time wisely." "Admiral," Korath said desperately, "surely we can negotiate. The destruction of your colony was regrettable. Perhaps we can reach some arrangement that avoids bloodshed." Vasquez's expression did not change. "There is nothing to negotiate. Your forces committed genocide against innocent civilians. The only question now is whether you will surrender peacefully or force us to take your surrender by other means." "You would destroy entire worlds for revenge?" Korath asked. "We would prefer not to," Vasquez replied. "But make no mistake, if you force us to fight, we will win. And when we do, the Zephrian hegemony will cease to exist. Your choice is simple: surrender now and face justice, or resist and face annihilation." The communication ended, leaving Korath staring at a blank screen. Around him, his staff waited for orders that he was not sure he could give. Outside, the sky continued to darken as more human ships took position. In the Great Council chamber, Supreme Leader Vorth made the hardest decision of his long life. The Zephrian hegemony had ruled their part of the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire species. They had believed themselves to be the strongest military power in their region of space. Now they faced a force so overwhelming that resistance was not just futile, it was insane. The humans had built a fleet larger than anything in Galactic history. They had revealed military capabilities that no intelligence service had detected. They had shown that beneath their peaceful exterior lay something that could literally darken the stars. "Send the message," Vorth said quietly to his communications officer. "We surrender." Admiral Vasquez received the Zephrian surrender with grim satisfaction. Justice for New Eden would be served, but it brought no joy. The dead colonists would not return to life. The murdered children would not grow up to have families of their own. But the galaxy would remember this day. They would remember that humanity could be peaceful neighbors and generous trading partners. They would also remember that attacking human civilians brought swift and overwhelming retaliation. The stars around Zephyr Prime remained dark, blocked by nearly 1 million human warships. The Zephrians had learned their lesson about humanity's true capabilities. Soon every species in the galaxy would learn it too. The surrender ceremony took place on Admiral Vasquez's flagship Unity in the shadow of 900,000 human warships. General Korath and the entire Zephrian High Command were brought aboard under heavy guard. They walked through corridors lined with human marines whose faces showed no emotion, only cold professionalism. Korath had expected to meet savage warriors driven by thoughts of revenge. Instead, he found himself facing Admiral Vasquez in a simple conference room with white walls and basic furniture. The human commander sat quietly at a metal table, reviewing documents on a tablet computer. She looked more like a teacher than a conqueror. "Please sit," Vasquez said without looking up. Her voice was calm and businesslike, as if she were discussing a shipping contract rather than the surrender of an entire civilization. Korath and his officers took their seats across from the admiral. Through the room's windows, they could see endless rows of human battleships stretching into the distance. The sight reminded them that they were completely at the mercy of their former victims. "The terms are simple," Vasquez began, finally looking up from her tablet. "First, all Zephrian military forces will surrender immediately. Your ships will be impounded and your crews interned until they can be processed. Second, all territories conquered by the hegemony will be granted immediate independence. Third, those responsible for war crimes will face trial. Fourth, reparations will be paid to the families of New Eden's victims." She paused and fixed Korath with a steady gaze. "Finally, the Zephrian military will be permanently disbanded. You will be allowed to keep only a small defense force suitable for police work and disaster relief." Korath felt his throat go dry. "Admiral, you are essentially demanding the end of our civilization. Without our military, we cannot defend ourselves from other threats. You should have thought of that before you murdered 2 million innocent people," Vasquez replied coldly. "However, I am not unreasonable. Humanity will guarantee the security of Zephrian space. Any species that attacks you will answer to us." The implications were staggering. The Zephrians were being placed under human protection whether they wanted it or not. They would become, in effect, a client state of the Human Federation. Their 1,000-year empire was ending not with a battle, but with a signature on a surrender. Document. Supreme Leader Vorth signed the papers with a trembling hand. As he wrote his name, he officially ended the Zephrian hegemony and placed his people under human authority. The ceremony was recorded and broadcast across the galaxy, ensuring that every species would see the consequences of attacking human civilians within hours of the surrender. Human administrators began arriving at Zephrian worlds. They came not as conquerors but as bureaucrats carrying clipboards and legal documents. Their job was to oversee the transition from military empire to peaceful civilization. Dr. Sarah Chun found herself appointed as administrator for the Zephrian agricultural sector. Her experience on New Eden made her uniquely qualified to help transform their war economy into something that could feed their people. She worked 18-hour days helping Zephrian farmers convert military factories into food processing plants. "We need to increase grain production by 40% to feed the populations you were keeping as slaves," Chun explained to a group of Zephrian agricultural officials. "Here are the crop rotation schedules that will maximize your harvest yields." The Zephrians listened carefully to the human who was helping them survive their transition to peace. Many of them had expected the humans to be cruel victors who would enslave or eliminate their former enemies. Instead, they found administrators who seemed genuinely interested in helping them build a better society. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news of humanity's overwhelming victory was reshaping interstellar politics. Species that had been planning aggressive actions against human colonies suddenly discovered urgent reasons to pursue diplomatic solutions instead. The Altarian Republic had been preparing to invade 3 human farming worlds that they claimed were in disputed territory. When they learned about the 900,000 ship fleet at Zephyr Prime, the Republic's War Council held an emergency meeting. "Cancel all military operations immediately," ordered Chancellor Vex. "Send our best diplomats to negotiate a peaceful resolution with the humans." "But Chancellor," protested General Thane, "we have been planning this invasion for 2 years. Our forces are already in position." "Have you seen the reports from Zephyr Prime?" Vex asked incredulously. "The humans have more ships than we have soldiers. If we attack their colonies, they will send that fleet here next. Do you want to explain to our people why we provoked the destruction of our civilization?" Similar conversations were taking place in government centers across the galaxy. The Vegan Empire immediately offered to sign favorable trade agreements with humanity. The Centauri Alliance sent gifts and messages of friendship. Even the proud Andromedans requested formal diplomatic meetings. Ambassador, Patricia Williams found herself busier than she had ever been in her 30-year diplomatic career. Her office on Earth was flooded with requests for meetings from alien governments that had previously ignored human attempts at communication. "How many more requests came in today?" Williams asked her assistant. 47 new requests for trade agreements," came the reply. 12 requests for mutual defense pacts. And the Regalian Federation wants to discuss joining the human sphere of influence voluntarily. Williams shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, these same governments had treated humanity as a minor nuisance on the galactic stage. Now they were practically begging for human friendship and protection. President Thompson addressed the Human Federation Council 6 months after the surrender of the Zephrian hegemony. Representatives from all human worlds gathered to hear about the new galactic situation that their overwhelming military response had created. "Citizens of humanity," Thompson began, "we have achieved justice for New Eden, but more importantly, we have established a new principle in galactic affairs. Any species that commits genocide against human civilians will face the full weight of human civilization." The president gestured to a display showing the current deployment of human forces. The massive fleet had not been disbanded after the Zephrian surrender. Instead, it had been reorganized into permanent battle groups stationed throughout human space and beyond. "The New Eden Memorial Fleet will remain active as a reminder to the galaxy," Thompson continued. "We are peaceful people who prefer trade and cooperation. But we are also capable of defending ourselves and our allies with force that can darken the very stars." The Memorial Fleet consisted of 200,000 ships permanently assigned to patrol human space and respond to threats. Another 300,000 ships were stationed at key points throughout the galaxy, serving as a deterrent to potential aggressors. The remaining 400,000 ships were held in reserve, ready to deploy wherever they might be needed. Admiral Vasquez remained in command of this unprecedented force. Her flagship Unity had become a mobile capital that could project human power across vast distances. She spent her time visiting human colonies in allied worlds, ensuring that the galaxy understood humanity's commitment to peace through strength. The trials of Zephrian war criminals began 1 year after New Eden's destruction. General Korath and his staff were brought before a special tribunal that included judges from multiple species. The evidence against them was overwhelming: satellite recordings of the massacre, communications intercepts showing their deliberate targeting of civilians, and testimony from the few human survivors. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes served as the chief prosecutor in the trials. She had lost friends on New Eden and was determined to see justice done. Her opening statement was broadcast across the galaxy, ensuring that every species heard the details of what the Zephrians had done. "The defendants systematically murdered 2,300,000 innocent civilians," Hayes told the tribunal. "They targeted schools, hospitals, and refugee ships. They showed no mercy to children or elderly. This was not war, it was genocide of the worst kind." Korath was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote human penal colony. His officers received similar sentences. The trials served as a warning to other species about the consequences of attacking human civilians. The transformation of Zephrian society proceeded remarkably smoothly under human supervision. The former slave worlds were granted independence and provided with human advisors to help establish democratic governments. The Zephrian homeworld itself was restructured as a peaceful republic with term limits and civil rights protections. Many Zephrians initially resented their human overseers, but this attitude changed as they saw the benefits of the new system. Food production increased dramatically under human agricultural techniques. Medical care improved with access to human technology. Educational opportunities expanded as human teachers shared their knowledge. Young Zephrians who had grown up during the transition period often expressed gratitude for the changes. Kex, a Zephrian student who had been a child during the war, wrote in her school essay, "Before the humans came, my people lived in fear of our own government. Now we are free to choose our own leaders and speak our minds." The humans showed U.S. that strength should protect the weak, not exploit them. The New Eden Memorial was built on the site of the destroyed colony 5 years after the massacre. It consisted of simple stone walls inscribed with the names of every person who had died in the attack. At the center stood a statue showing a human family looking up at the stars, representing humanity's peaceful expansion into the galaxy. Sarah Chun brought her sons to the memorial's dedication ceremony. Tommy and Mike, now teenagers, placed flowers at the base of their father's name on the memorial wall. They had grown up knowing that their family's loss had changed the course of galactic history. "Do you think Dad would be proud of what we accomplished?" Tommy asked his mother. Sarah looked up at the statue and thought about her husband, who had died defending their farm. "I think he would be proud that we made sure no other family will suffer what we suffered. And I think he would be amazed that humanity found the strength to build something good from such terrible loss." The memorial became a pilgrimage site for humans from across the galaxy, but it also attracted visitors from other species who wanted to understand the event that had reshaped galactic politics. Alien children learned about the price of aggression by reading the names on those walls. 10 years after New Eden's destruction, the galaxy had settled into a new pattern of international relations. Humanity had become the dominant military power, but they used that power primarily as a deterrent. The massive memorial fleet patrolled trade routes, protected weak species from exploitation, and ensured that no other genocides occurred. Trade flourished under the new system. Human agricultural techniques helped feed hungry populations across the galaxy. Human medical knowledge saved lives on dozens of worlds. Human teachers shared educational methods that improved literacy and scientific understanding throughout known space. But everyone remembered the lesson of New Eden. Carved into the memorial walls were the words that had become humanity's unofficial motto: "We are a peaceful people. Do not test our capacity for war." Admiral Vasquez, now in her 70s, stood on the Bridge of Unity and watched as another patrol fleet departed for the outer reaches of the galaxy. The ships moved with the confidence of a force that had never been challenged since that day at Zephyr Prime when they had darkened the stars. Her aide, now Admiral Jackson, approached with the daily intelligence reports. "Any threats to human colonies today?" he asked. "None," Vasquez replied with satisfaction. "There have been no serious threats to human civilians in over 5 years. The galaxy has learned to respect our strength and appreciate our peaceful intentions." She looked out at the stars that her ships protected and thought about the farmers and families living safely on hundreds of human worlds. They slept peacefully because the galaxy knew that humanity would never again allow the massacre of innocents. The Zephrians had wanted to teach humanity about staying in their place. Instead, they had taught the galaxy that humanity's place was wherever justice and peace needed protection. The 900,000 ships that had once darkened the stars above Zephyr Prime now served as guardians of a new galactic order based on respect for life and the rule of law. New Eden was gone, but its legacy lived on in the safer, more just galaxy that had emerged from its ashes. The children who played on human colonies across the stars would never know the fear that had once threatened their peaceful worlds, and if anyone ever again threatened those children, they would face the full fury of a species that had proven it could marshal the power to darken the very heavens themselves.